Good morning, General.
Good morning.
As commander of the Allied Command Izmir, what is your first impression about exercise Guardian 13?
Well, I'm very pleased to see the exercise taking place as the alliance transitions from a focus in Afghanistan to a focus on contingency operations. These sorts of exercises are very important a very important part of maintaining readiness, our skills, and interoperability. So this is exactly the kind of thing that the Corps headquarters here should be doing.
As you know very well, NRDC Greece has undertaken the responsibility to be evaluated as combat-ready headquarters in 2015. Do you think that this exercise was a proper step and on the right track towards achieving full HRF capabilities?
This exercise is exactly what the headquarters should be doing, to practice the command and control, to practice all the functions, and especially to exercise the communications, getting the command information systems, communications and information systems operating in a multinational environment is a critical part of that. So I think this is an important part of the process to achieve HRF, High Readiness Force certification. The exercise will be in 2015, so there will be opportunities in 2014, next year, also where the headquarters will train, in fact with my headquarters, in an exercise at the end of 2014. So this is a necessary step to get there.
How do you envisage the role of the Allied Command Izmir in supporting NRDC Greece towards this evaluation and within the framework of the mutual training support?
The Allied Land Command, my headquarters, which is based in Izmir, is responsible for the certification of all of the corps to achieve HRF status or to meet NATO standards. So the most important role that we have is to ensure that this headquarters is able to achieve the NATO standard. Obviously, I want to see them achieve that standard. And so Land Command is going to work very hard to provide training opportunities, resources, to do everything that we can to help NRDC Greece achieve the certification to be a high readiness force. So from a certification standpoint, that's one aspect. The second aspect, during Trident Lance 14, the exercise next December, where the Land Command headquarters will be the Land Component Command under JFC Naples, NRDC Greece and NRDC Turkey and other headquarters will be the subordinate commands as part of a a major joint operation exercise. That will be a very important exercise for this headquarters to practice the full range of functions it will have to do in 2015 to achieve the certification to be a high readiness force. So Land Command has a certification role, providing resources in a mutual training support context, and then also to provide an exercise opportunity, Trident Lance 14. I think all of those will enable this headquarters to be able to meet the standards to be an HRF.
Upon Al-Shafira, NATO is shifting from mission deployment and engagement to mission preparedness. Do you foresee any specific role for ground forces headquarters at this transition?
I think it's more important than ever. The alliance is, exactly as you say, transitioning from a campaign posture, a deployed posture, to one that is based on readiness for contingency. So that has a training implication, that instead of practicing for a specific mission like ISAF in Afghanistan, all of the headquarters and forces of the nations in NATO now have to transition to prepare for contingencies. That means our exercise programs will be increasingly sophisticated, multi-echelon, meaning JFC, Land Component, Corps, Division, Brigade, and within a joint context. Because two things: none of us will ever do anything by ourselves, including the U.S. we will always be part of a coalition or an alliance. And number two, we will never operate without air and maritime resources. It will always be in a joint context. So in the post-ISAF era, Land Command is going to work very hard to make sure that all the land forces of NATO, the 9 corps that make up the NATO force structure, as well as the national land forces, are as effective as they can be, or as interoperable as they can be, because they're all going to have to work together, and that they're going to have to be able to operate within a joint environment.
General, you're commanding a very crucial land-based headquarters which is located at the eastern part of the Alliance's territory. How the cooperation among the rest headquarters could be more efficient towards a future joint task force mission?
Land Command was created by the agreement of all 28 nations to ensure the effectiveness and interoperability of all land forces. As I mentioned earlier, we will always operate inside a coalition, if not the entire alliance, and we will always operate within a joint context as part of a joint team. SACUR, General Breedlove, told me that Land Command was responsible for ensuring that all land exercises take place within a joint context, because he knows that no land forces will operate by themselves without air and maritime. So that's one aspect of it. It's important to remember that all the people of the world, all 9 billion, live on the land. So it's important to have strong air forces, powerful maritime forces, but you need land forces to be able to interact with the people, to protect infrastructure, to protect population, to protect land masses, to build the capacity of other nations to protect themselves. So Land Command has that responsibility for the alliance, to help each nation's land forces be able to do that. As part of the transformation of NATO, the number of headquarters, the nations agreed for a significant reduction in the number of the headquarters. For example, under ACO, Allied Command Operations, there used to be 11 headquarters, now there's 6. SHAPE, which is the Supreme Headquarters, that's in Mons, Belgium. Joint Force Command Brunsum in the Netherlands. Joint Force Command Naples, of course, in Italy. And then there's one Land Command, that's our headquarters, is in Izmir in Turkey. One Air Command, which is in Ramstein in Germany. And then one Maritime Command, which is in Northwood in the UK. So my headquarters is located in Turkey, but actually I spend only about 4 days each month in Turkey. The rest of the month I am in all the other countries of NATO. 28 nations in NATO, 27 of them have land forces. So that's why I'm in Greece now. I was in Albania earlier this week. I was in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland the last 2 weeks. Next week I'll be in Belgium. So that's the location of the headquarters. It was a political decision that all the nations agreed to, but I spend my time across all of NATO. It is important to note that the location being in Turkey is a signal to the rest of the world, to the Caucasus, to the Middle East, that Turkey is part of NATO's territory, just like Greece, Italy, Poland, and other countries that are on the edge, if you will, on the boundary of the alliance. And so if anybody from outside of NATO was to attack Turkey or to attack Greece, the alliance is going to fulfill its obligation to protect each other. That's why the nations agreed to provide Patriots to Turkey, and Turkey has asked for an extension for another year because of the threat of Scud missiles coming from Syria. So while the headquarters is on the eastern edge of NATO, our functions touch all of NATO.
Okay. What are the main challenges you face as the commander of Allied Command Izmir?
Every one of the nations in NATO is facing budget challenges, economic challenges. Each nation is reducing the size of its military, including the United States, significant reductions. The security challenges are still significant. The alliance has changed from a Cold War defensive organization against the threat of the Soviet Union. Think of that as, if this was a software program, that would be NATO 1.0, and that was the first 40 years. Then the next 20 years, call it NATO 2.0, the alliance still was focused on defense, same organization, but for the first time began to go outside. I-4 in Bosnia, followed by S-4, then the K-4 in Kosovo, Afghanistan, ISAF. These are all examples of NATO going outside of its boundary to deal with security issues, but same organization. We now, with the end of the ISAF mission, transition to Resolute Support Mission, think of it as NATO 3.0. Not only are we still dealing with threats outside the territory of NATO countries, the organization is completely different. As I just described, a significant reduction in the number of headquarters, a much smaller number of personnel in uniform. The alliance has to be affordable, which is why it was made smaller, but we have to adapt to the new challenges: cyber, ballistic missile, piracy, and yet we also have to retain the capability to deal with an Article 5 conventional threat, so a full range of threats. A good way to think about it, this change in the alliance, is transitioning from defense to security, which means it's important to deal with problems before they become a problem inside our territory, whether it's terrorism, cyber, ballistic missiles, piracy. So that's a slightly different change. So what challenge does that present for Land Command? It's the same challenge it presents for all of NATO. Nations still need to provide adequate resources for their soldiers to be able to carry out their tasks. Greece meets the NATO obligation of at least 2% of the GDP. In fact, I think Greece is like 2.4%. So Greece is meeting that standard. We have Greek soldiers that serve in our headquarters in Izmir at Allied Land Command, as well as in other NATO headquarters. So the challenge is getting the nations to do that, to continue to resource their security obligations even as they reduce in size. The second challenge is to achieve the level of interoperability we need, because we're all getting smaller. We have to rely on each other even more. To be interoperable, you have to have English skills, because English is the working language of all NATO headquarters. French and English are the two official languages, but the language in the headquarters is English. So I would encourage the Greek Army to continue to emphasize English, to get English experience. Your English is very good, for example, as a non-commissioned officer. To be effective part of a NATO team, you have to have English skills. So that will always be a challenge, which is one of the reasons I would like to see Americans be assigned to NRDC Greece, so that you have native English speakers here, who obviously that would help. And then the third part is interoperability of communications systems. You don't have to have the same equipment. Each nation has its own equipment, but the systems have to interface. So a Greek headquarters with a German subordinate unit and a British subordinate unit and an American adjacent unit, they all have to be able to operate together with data, video, common operating picture. That probably technically is the biggest challenge that I have.
Okay. And our last question now. What could be your message towards NRDC Greece personnel?
you belong to a very good headquarters that's got experience. The soldiers, men and women who serve in this headquarters have an opportunity to be a vehicle for improving regional security. And by that I'm talking about the Balkans. I would like to see an increase in the number of nations and the number of personnel who come from those nations in this headquarters. I think your commander, as well as your chief of defense, have exactly the right approach to make this increase the multinationality of NRDC Greece. It can be a vehicle for improving that cooperation. So I'm excited about the potential that's here, and Land Command wants to be a part of that, to assist that. And I think if you do that, it will help us more quickly achieve the requirements to be an HRF. You'll have the people necessary and the improved effectiveness in time for the evaluation and certification. So I'm proud of the men and women in this headquarters, and I'm excited about the potential that you have.
General, thank you very much. We all appreciate your contribution to NRDC Greece Herald, and allow us to wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, sir.